Well, joining us now is the Federal Minister of Justice, David Lametti. Minister, thank you for joining us.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
So change is coming. Details still need to be worked out, but you say consensus has been achieved between you and your provincial counterparts. A consensus on what?
Well, on a number of different ways in which we can all work together to ensure that Canadians feel safe with respect to the bail process and are safe. So there are a number of legislative initiatives that we have targeted. You've heard some discussion of these publicly in the past number of days and weeks. We're going to work out the details of that. So some criminal code changes to the parts on bail, but also a number of non-legislative changes in terms of making the administration of bail more effective across Canada. And again, that requires collaboration. And also, the whole thing is framed obviously by charter rights and by the fact that we're aware that there is the systemic over-incarceration of Indigenous peoples, Black Canadians, other marginalized Canadians in the criminal justice system. So we were all well aware of that, and we were attentive to the social determinants of crime as well.
Now, we know that the provinces and the territories have said that they want change in the bail system. You know, after sitting down with them, I'm wondering if you might describe to us what you heard. What would you say unifies their concern?
Well, certainly the concern is echoed in the letter that the premiers wrote to the Prime Minister, that there's a fear after a certain number of very tragic events in Canada, most recently the death of Constable Pierre Challa in Ontario. There's a fear that the system isn't treating repeat violent offenders very well, or isn't the bail system is too lenient with respect to those offenders, or that the bail system is too lenient with respect to certain crimes committed with weapons. And so these are concerns that have been heard, I think, time and time again, both from my provincial and territorial colleagues as well as from the premiers to the Prime Minister.
Now, the demand for change, it does follow your government's passage of Bill C-75. Did the provinces mention any concerns specifically about that piece of legislation?
Well, certainly it is a framing aspect of our discussion. Bill C-75 was the product of a long collaboration, a long series of exchanges of information between the provinces, territories, and the federal government. It also framed a number of different Supreme Court of Canada decisions and incorporated them formally into our law. They were already existing in our law. And reflected the principle in Canadian law that you're innocent until proven guilty and that you have a presumptive right to bail. That's present in the Canadian Charter. It was present in the Canadian Bill of Rights. It's a long-standing part of the Canadian common law tradition as well. So all of those factors were there. So Bill C-75 was part of that discussion, and certainly working within those parameters, we believe we have a plan moving forward.
Now, some criminal defense lawyers have expressed worry ahead of this meeting that perhaps any change that might come down the bail system would be a reaction to a few cases and at the end of the day end up hurting a lot more people. I'm wondering how you would respond to that concern and whether or not it was addressed during your meeting.
Well, we're certainly very sensitive to those concerns. Again, what we do will have to be framed by charter principles and by the presumptive right to bail in the Canadian criminal justice system. So I think that ought to allay a number of the different fears that have been raised, the very legitimate fears that have been raised by Criminal Defense Counsel, amongst others. But there's also a very legitimate view from across Canada that there are a number of instances in which the bail system has either failed or made Canadians feel unsafe. in their own communities. And so we have to, as Minister of Justice, we also have to address that. Obviously, we're framed by the Charter and Charter principles, common principles that we share as the result of the evolution of our legal system. But we also have an ongoing duty to make changes when those changes are justified. And it isn't just a matter of a few isolated cases. There have been voices from across Canada. Again, you heard all the provincial premiers right to the Prime Minister. So there's clearly a shared concern there.
Mm-hmm. So what kind of timeline are we looking at? What kind of next step might we be waiting for right now?
Well, I've committed to moving as soon as possible to make those legislative changes. Again, they can't be made overnight, but we're pretty confident that we have a basis to move forward relatively quickly through the usual parliamentary processes. So that will be on me, but we'll continue our discussions over coming days and weeks, and hopefully we'll have something to announce fairly soon.
Minister Lametti, really appreciate the time again. Thank you for this.
Thank you.